Hi, everyone, and welcome to Live at the Candy Factory. I'm Ann Kirby, and my guest tonight is Jessi Purdy of FIC Human Resource Partners. Jessi, thank you so much for being here this evening.
Thank you for having me, Ann. I've been missing coming into the Candy Factory and hanging out and doing some work.
Oh, we're missing you so much. We're missing all of our people. It's been incredibly challenging, but, you know, we're all trying to do the right thing, right?
Absolutely.
It's been a real challenge, but I thank you for joining because this evening's conversation I think is essential for small businesses as we're navigating this mandated shutdown and what a reopening looks like. And a lot of people are planning their process right now, and HR is such an important piece of this puzzle. And so your expertise and your advice and insight this evening is very much appreciated. So tell me a little bit about you and your background, and that'd be great.
Well, I actually grew up here in Lancaster, left for the military right out of high school, spent 4 years there, lived in Virginia for quite a few years, worked my way up into a regional manager position, ended up out in the Chicago area for a few years, ended up in Johnstown for 2, and then started my consulting business in 2018. And I started with the focus of fostering inclusive cultures, which is what the FIC and FIC Human Resource Partners stands for. And so my goal has always been to foster these inclusive cultures through policy training and discussion. And that's kind of where my focus has been. I'm an employee first HR person. And I think HR really is at its best when it's employee centric. And at the same time can, support and protect the business that it's part of. If you put the business before the employees, you're not going to serve the business very well.
Sure, I agree, totally. And so how have you been impacted by this crisis?
Well, early on, I took a pretty big hit. I do public speaking engagements, and obviously the majority of those have dried up. I do have one tomorrow. Tomorrow's Wednesday, training session with the Alzheimer's Association, doing a discussion on dementia and LGBTQ elders and their care. I've got another one that I'm probably still on for August, but we're still finding out. But I had been doing employee lifecycle management, the hiring, firing, the day-to-day management for some small businesses. But obviously, as they had to furlough people, that side of my business took a pretty big hit. And last week, I made the difficult decision to shutter that portion of my business. So I'm remaining focused on the fostering inclusive culture side of things, the policy development, the training, the discussions, and the basically leadership coaching to kind of develop these cultures. And so that's where my primary focus is at this time. And I'm also trying to figure out how to take my training and my speaking into a more virtual setting.
Got it. So yeah, so many are trying to pivot their businesses right now. And so question for you. I just want to, well, actually, before I ask you another question, we just got a comment here. I just want to let everyone know that if they comment in the Facebook feed, that we can see it and we'll answer your questions. So go to here, make sure I'm sending someone the link. They can ask their questions. So what are some of the most pressing concerns your clients or even some of the businesses that you've been talking to have had as it relates to not only the situation of furloughing their staff while they're mandated to shut down, for example, or they've had to make changes in the business, but as we're looking to reopen, and what does those policies look like?
So some of the hardest decisions that they're being faced with is, when do I bring people back? How do I bring them back? How do I keep them safe? How do I meet all of the standards? Which standards do I need to be following? And those are the difficult questions. I mean, when you bring your employees back, you have to make sure that you can follow all the mitigation procedures that are being recommended and sometimes even mandated for reopening. Is it possible in your workspace to have your employees come back and maintain 6 feet of distance while doing their job? Are you going to provide the masks? If you're not going to provide the masks, Where are they going to get them?
Mm.
Okay. Do you have enough hand sanitizer for your employees so that they can be, practicing that, that aspect? If you do have it, are you going to be able to continue to get it?
Mm.
What happens if your supply chain runs out? What are your cleaning procedures? When do you do your wipe downs? Who's responsible for them? Do you have the system in place to get those supplies replenished quickly and timely? Which employees are going to be in charge of enforcing the rules with clients or customers that are coming in? There's all kinds of things. You have to take care of the customers and the employees at the same time, and some of those are going to be very similar, and some of those are going to be very different tasks. And
Sure.
so figuring out which ones you need and how to do that and how to maintain that is very important. And of course, then there's always the, what happens when your employees don't want to come back?
Mm.
When they don't feel safe, when they're concerned that the policies and the procedures that you're talking about aren't in fact going to be able to be implemented in a way that's consistent and effective.
Sure. I mean, that's a real concern, which makes sense. I mean, especially if you live you have a condition that makes you vulnerable, or you have a family member who could be vulnerable to this, or it's you're asking your staff, obviously, to put all of those things at risk, everything that they care for as well. So it's essential that you're giving them everything that they need to feel safe. And I can understand the apprehension by staff about when's the right time to come back? When do they feel comfortable? And then what is a business owner supposed to do when it comes to, if you're trying to open and you need now not only your staff, but maybe extra staff to make sure you're meeting all of these new procedures, with limited resources, what's the liability? How do you juggle that?
Exactly. And, things to keep in mind is what is your sick time policy? Does that cover your employees that are going to not come back when they don't feel comfortable? If you furlough them or they don't come back, how long are they on how long are you responsible for them when it comes to unemployment? When do you make the decision, hey, you need to come back or I have to let you go?
Sure.
Because if you have an employee that says, hey, I'm not going to come back until whatever, and that turns into 6 months, can you afford to go 6 months with that employee? And like I said, I'm an employee first kind of person, and you should do everything you can, but at the same time, you do have a business, and you do have to make some of those tough business calls.
Sure.
So those are kind of things. If your employee calls you and says, hey, I've got a tickle in the back of my throat, or I'm sneezing this morning, I think I might be sick. You tell them to stay home. If you do you pay them for that? Do you adjust your sick policies to allow for that?
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times, especially small businesses, you only offer a few days of sick time. And if an employee's sick, they just kind of take the, Dayquil, NyQuil, show up to work, do their job, pretend they're not sick. And can we really afford that in this particular period of time?
I mean, we're going to be testing temperatures of staff, coming in. They understand that that's going to be part of the new protocol. What are you hearing when it comes to what are those requirements? And are your clients already, if they're open, testing symptoms and are having that question when staff arrives? What are you seeing on that front?
So I think that depends a little bit about what industry you're in. So a lot of restaurants and stuff where some of those mitigation factors just can't be taken into effect are being a lot more involved with, yes, we've got the little laser to take your temperature from afar, but not all businesses do. Not all businesses have the staff to devote to that particular aspect of it. Many stores and businesses have posted that it's required that you have masks, and yet people are still walking in without masks. And so then someone in the store has to ask them to leave. And those situations can escalate very quickly.
As we've seen already with the Family Dollar, I believe, has had a couple incidents.
Yep. Family Dollar. We had incidents at Target, McDonald's. I mean, some of those were broken arms. We had the shooting at McDonald's. The ice cream shop in Massachusetts opened. The customers just harassed and verbally abused the staff member so badly that the very next day the ice cream shop closed again because it wasn't worth it to their employees.
Right.
Menards had police called, and I don't think we have Menards out here on this coast, but anybody's familiar with that, it's kind of a home improvement store.
Got it.
They had a man barge through their security barriers and had to get the cops involved.
Wow.
I mean, so these are situations. Locally, we've had at least one business that has had to take out a letter of no trespass against someone who became angry and instigating towards violence to resolve an issue because it escalated. And so these things are happening.
And then it goes beyond just safety of staff. It starts becoming a liability. And I know there is already conversations about what does lawsuits look like in this new world that we're in. And that's yet another thing that business owners need to keep in mind. We have a question real quick. Tracy, thanks for commenting. So if we require temp checks and masks, et cetera, do these items need to be added to handbooks or can they be added to the daily procedures?
They don't have to be added to the employee handbook because we're all going to hope that in a year or so, we won't have to worry about this every time. But it does need to be a written policy. So daily procedures is an excellent way of doing that. So creating a separate policy that would be communicable disease mitigation policy, creating that so that the next time one of these events comes up, you've already got the policy written. We can work with existing best practices and update as new procedures come to light. That would be the best course to go for any business, is to go ahead and write that policy now based on known procedures that we have, and then update it in the future if it's necessary.
Yeah, that's very smart. I mean, I think especially if we end up seeing a second wave in the fall, like having those already in place now and in the future. And will insurance require that moving forward as well, I would think, potentially, or,
Potentially it might. And that's something that I think we all need to be doing as small business owners, is assessing where we're at. And one of the first things we need to assess is our business and liability insurance. When was the last time any of us checked in on what's actually covered? When this happened, did any of us think to ask on day one, hey, what's my liability? What is my coverage if someone gets sick because of this? You might be surprised. Some of our insurances might have riders on there that don't cover communicable disease and leaves us open to liability, even though we're operating within the law. And that's something you should be checking on at this point.
Right. And I know that the liability is a real concern. I mean, we will be even having members sign waivers at the candy factory saying kind of you enter at your own risk, even though we will be taking all of the legal, the CDC requirements. We'll be making sure that we're following all the rules. But, it's hard to safeguard yourself. And even if it's a frivolous lawsuit, we know the cost of those. Someone I know actually ended up having a lawsuit, had nothing to do with their business. It ended up being thrown out, but the time and energy and the money that was spent to try to just get that under control was just astronomical. And we are operating with even smaller budgets considering this, and even limited resources. So talking to legal counsel, especially if you were to open up prematurely, I would assume that you're at a greater risk.
Yeah, first, let me say I'm not a lawyer and I cannot give legal advice.
Right.
But yes, if you open in accordance with, say, Lancaster County's government, we're in yellow when the governor and the state are still saying we're in red, you're opening yourself up to additional liability. Governor Wolf actually did set out something in writing that said, if you operate in this manner, you could lose your insurance, you could lose your licenses and your certifications. And so those are things you really have to be paying attention to. Is your decision to open in line with what the most strict policies are at this time? or are you trying to take a lesser course and get open sooner? My advice is always to look at the most stringent opening procedures and follow those. Those will mitigate your risks more than anything else. If you're doing everything that's being recommended to the maximum, you are less likely to open yourself up to risk. But that can be a difficult hurdle to clear. And it does take time to make sure that you've really researched what is the best course of action. How do I actually implement this? How do I keep it implemented? And how do I make sure that it's being enforced within my own business? And until you can answer all those questions, maybe you need to wait a little bit longer just to make sure.
And the CDC did just come out last week with some flowcharts that were quite handy to determine, are you ready or not ready to open? And so I do suggest people taking a look at those.
I missed that. When you get a chance, you'll have to share that one with me.
I will share them with you.
I've been trying to keep up, but there are so many new things that come out. It's like, where do I find them? When did it come out? Who's what?
It is overwhelming, and that's why I think it's really important to take a step back, remove politics out of your decision making, and actually really, really, truly look at your business and think about the liability aspect. Think about your staff. Think about your own safety as well, and open smartly with the right procedures in place. And Tracy, you did ask another. And enter at your own risk. Is that a recommendation from attorney insurance carrier? No. So I'm working with my attorney right now on what our procedures are going to look like, and what some of the we have all of our members sign confidentiality agreements anyway. So we have a membership agreement just because of the nature of our facility, and so we will be including this as a clause in our membership agreements that basically, we are in a pandemic, and if you do get sick, it is not that you are out and about at your own risk. And I think that that's a fair thing to have people sign who are choosing to use facilities. I think that that's staff is different, but members who are choosing to be there can say, and it's also not only enter at your own risk, it's also you're going to comply to our new procedures. You're going to wear a mask when you need to. You're going to, like, for example, we're going to have more of a barista cafe style and serving our members that way versus allowing them to get their own coffee. We're basically looking at every single surface in our facility, and we have 20,000 square feet. And we're like, how do you reduce use of that surface, right? So and that is incredibly overwhelming because there's so many variables, like up and down stairs.
Yeah.
So we've come out with a whole procedure on how you can safely use a banister.
Yeah.
The restroom. So you should allow for time between bathroom uses. Mm-hmm. So we actually found a little digital clock that's motion censored.
Right.
So when you exit the restroom, you can actually hover over it and it will count down 5 minutes. So if someone else is coming toward the restroom, they can see that they might need to wait another 2 minutes before they go into the restroom. That's above and beyond the CDC requirements, but we're covering all the bases.
Well, and you have to. And I mean, if you look at some of the recommendations that are being made, Pennsylvania's COVID-19 safety procedure for business handout sheet actually says you should be scheduling hand washing breaks for employees at least once an hour.
Yep.
Think about that. That's once an hour. So you have to make sure that you've made time for that. You have to make sure that you're ordering more paper towels and more hand soaps than ever before, because you're going to be increasing use if people follow this policy. So things to keep in mind is, like, especially with restaurants, When you open, are you going to seat every other table?
Mhm.
Is that going to be, zigzag pattern if you've got tables across from one another? How are you going to manage your waiting room? Okay.
Yeah.
Especially with restaurants. How many small restaurants actually have a requirement right now for, calling in reservations? How do you manage those reservations? Where do people wait for those reservations? You're going to have them out in the car? Are you going to text on your reservation and they can come in? These are things you kind of have to start thinking about. And every business is going to be different. An office environment that's shared and open like the Candy Factory is going to have a different set of requirements than one that is a closed office.
Yep.
Only for people to sit and work in the office. It doesn't have clients, it doesn't have people coming and going. It's going to be different for a clothing store. What is your return policy going to look like on clothing? What is your policy for changing rooms? Honestly, people are going to be touching all those clothes. What's your policy? These are things that we have to keep in mind as business owners. And each business is going to have to take a look at its own business model and go, what are the things that I didn't think about last week? How do people walk through my space and interact with my space? How do they interact with my products or my services? Where are the touch points that I never really thought about before because I didn't have to?
Yeah.
So I did see somebody asking about a specific type of business up here.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So I can't speak specifically to that business, but one of the things I said earlier was know where you're at so that you know how to get to where you need to be. So in Pennsylvania, Governor Wolf and the state have put out a list of all of your businesses listed under your NASIC code to tell you whether or not you can open under certain conditions. So first, if you don't know your NAIC code, go look that up. That will tell you generally what kind of business you're in. The first 4 numbers are a general category, and that's what you're going to find in that list. And that'll tell you whether or not you're an essential business and can be open now during the red, or when he puts out the yellow list, whether you fall in one of the yellow list categories. And that will help you kind of identify when it's appropriate for you to start opening back up. But it will also help you find other industries that you can connect with and look for resources online that will have similar needs as far as reopening policies and procedures, so that you can kind of start doing that research to go, okay, I fall under this category. So if there's someone in this category, this business that's putting out this, list of things that you can do, that's a good list to start with.
Yeah, no, that's really good advice. Tracy just mentioned that they're changing their retail to a jewelry case style candy shop. It's exhausting making all these changes, but it will allow us to be safe for us and customers. So yeah, I mean, we're retrofitting our space. We're making a lot of changes. We have to make investments, even though we're obviously we're mandated to shut down. We're at little to zero income, which is very taxing on small business that's already pretty taxed. I know that the EDC, Lancaster EDC and the Lancaster Chamber are working with task force on a reopening plan for the county, as well as funding for PPE and other resources for small businesses, because the cost is pretty large. Have you had any clients or any businesses that you've been talking to worried about being able to afford making these changes?
Yes, every business has been worried about whether or not they can afford to make changes. It's even businesses that have that cushion, they're all looking at their financial red line going, it's closer than we thought.
Right. And cash is king right now. You got to keep your cash.
And some people are actually beyond that red line because they've taken the loans to keep them afloat, and they know it, and they know they're in danger, and yet they still have to invest in the mitigation factors in order to open safely and remain in business. And that's one of those decisions we all have to make. I've invested money in my business so that I can be more virtual. Sure. I still have more money I need to invest. I'm also slowly doing it over a longer period of time, knowing that I'm not going to reap the financial rewards of the investments I made last month until probably fall or winter, because I still have other investments to make before I can effectively institute all the things I need to do. But if I don't make the investment, the business isn't going to last.
Well, yeah, I mean, you have to for your, I think it's not just for like my members. Again, it's for my team, which are my top priority, because without my team, the space doesn't function, and making sure that they feel safe is so essential, making sure our members feel safe. And so we're adding even some outdoor co-working spaces. Yeah, we're going to try to do some outdoor events as well. So, how do you see businesses changing some of their models to, like you're saying, you're going more virtual. A lot of people are going more virtual to try to accommodate staff as well as their clients.
Well, businesses that are more office and screen oriented, they can allow their employees to work virtually. It's easier for that to happen. They just need to adjust the way they do things and the way they perceive things. Obviously, you're working from home, situations are going to be a little bit different. People who work at the candy factory in co-working spaces that work for other companies, obviously those companies already have that kind of thing in place. They just need to make minor adjustments for the home. But when you're in a retail setting, when you're in a restaurant setting, that doesn't work. And so things that I've heard are, hey, we're a restaurant, we're going to start instituting a reservation only policy. That way we can limit the number of people who are arriving. People are being sat, we can sit them in a way that's safe, and we can avoid situations like what happened at Red Lobster, where they were completely overwhelmed and people were frustrated, angry in the parking lot, and or started a brawl.
Oh no! Oh.
So that's one of the things that I've seen being done. I know some retail spaces have instituted a one door in, one door out to help maintain traffic flow. I've seen them put signs, sticker signs on the floor. Say, please stand here, to maintain 6 feet of distance.
Sure.
So I've seen those kinds of things. I've seen them put up sneeze guards, add part-time employees that just kind of supplement, and every business is different, and you have to look at how your business is running and what you can really accomplish. Sure. There is no one-size-fits-all answer, not even within the same industry.
You're right. There isn't a one-size-fits-all, and I think every business has a risk level. Every business, and I think that's where the flow charts are really helpful too, is every business has slightly different needs and protocols. And so I will definitely share those charts. Tracy has another question. What resources do I have as an employer if an employee refuses to come back to work?
So right now, if you are still a non-essential business, Lancaster County by state definition is still in the red zone, and they can still continue to collect unemployment. And so if they're laid off because of this, they're laid off. At some point, you're going to have to look at the situation and go, okay, we've given you X number of weeks or days or months since we were legally allowed to reopen for you to come back. You've used all of your vacation time. You've used all of your sick time. There's
oh, okay.
No more of the FMLA or any of. Once all of the resources are exhausted for an employee to be out of work, you can absolutely at that point go, you've exhausted all resources. You either need to come back to work or we're going to have to let you go. But that's a difficult decision to make. And again, you have to really look at what resources are available to them as an employee to remain out of work, and when does that resource run out?
Right. So Tracy is unique, the fact that she has a candy manufacturing, and I think that she's been able to operate correct. And so, yeah, I mean, what I've done with our employees is say, if they don't feel comfortable coming back to the physical location, if they're a valued staff and team member, if they bring a lot of value to the organization and you would hate to lose them, are there ways that they can contribute, but remotely? And that might be challenging with actual like staff that's working either on the manufacturing side or the front facing side. But it's trying to be flexible as well, so you don't lose good quality staff.
Right. Like I said, it's these kinds of decisions that have to be made that are very difficult to make, and making sure that you've really looked at what your employee has as an option for remaining out of work and whether or not those options have been exhausted. Once they're exhausted, your employee comes back to work, or it's job abandonment, or you fire them, or they resign. Those are really your options. But when do you make that call? When do you go, hey, you either show up or it's job abandonment?
Right. And I could be wrong, but I believe that if it's COVID related, it does not affect your unemployment rate as an employer. Obviously, if someone was furloughed and then choose not to come back, because the way companies can get dinged,
yeah,
and the rates can go up, that you're not going to be impacted by that.
Yeah, and I know when this first got instituted, that was absolutely correct. Again, some of these things have changed, and the timing of things is also important, and that's why you really need to look at it. Where are you right now? What is open? What is the option that your employee has to stay out? And when does that resource expire? And that's a conversation that you need to have with your legal department, if you have an HR department, with your HR department, with unemployment. Again, I've closed that side of my business because I had to.
Sure.
And so
it's a lot. I mean, dealing with unemployment prior to COVID on top of everything else it's a very exhausting, very admin heavy experience. And Tracy is her HR. So yeah, I mean, I think that one of the things I'm hearing a lot from small business owners is just how exhausting this whole situation is when it comes to navigating loans and grants and panicking if you're not getting any kind of relief, wanting to be safe for your staff, your clients, members, whatever, navigating the politics, when do we open, when do we not open, those kind of things. So it's been a lot for business owners to manage. What advice do you say to them when it comes to just, I mean, obviously assess where they're at, but is there any advice on like, almost, not that this is not wellness, I mean, this is HR, but like, what would you suggest to a business owner who's getting maybe overwhelmed and just a little like, I don't know if I can keep doing this?
That's a difficult thing. And one of the policies that I like to write is an employee well-being policy, which really puts your staff and your employees first when it comes to physical, mental, and emotional well-being. And so we have to follow those things for ourselves too as business owners, and it is extremely exhausting. We're being asked to make decisions every day that we were never prepared to make, that we are making bigger decisions with less information, less surety than ever before. So the best advice I can give is to step back when you're feeling that overwhelmed. Just step back, take a breath. If you can go outside in a backyard or go for a walk, get some air, talk to someone else who's in a similar business, connect with resources like, Ann, I know you're exhausted and overwhelmed, but you've done an amazing job of creating a community and a resource center where we can all turn to and go, okay, I'm overwhelmed. I don't know where to go from here. Put it out in the group. This is what's got me today. I don't know where to go from here. Does anybody have something they can point me to? Lean on other business owners, lean on other, lean on some of your employees. I mean, if you've got a small team, I'm sure you all get along fairly well and you're very close knit. I'm sure you can go to one of your team members and go, hey, right now, this is where I'm at. This is what I'm doing. I trust you. Can you help me research this?
Right.
Pass some of it off.
Right.
I'm a team of one at this point, and I'm very lucky to have a few mentors in my life. And I've reached out to a couple of them and gone, hey, it's one of those days. Talk me off and talk me down here. And where do I go from here today?
Mentors, you make a really good point. I have a SCORE mentor. I have to say, Jerry Glenn, shout out to him. He's one of the best. He has helped me navigate this in a way that I don't think I would have made the decisions or all the decisions that I needed to make without his support and he just checking in, like, how are things going? Here's information. If you need something, let me know. And so you're right on point there with mentorship and having a network that you can go to and say, I'm on this roller coaster and today is maybe not a great day. And that's okay to not feel great. Mm-hmm. It's okay to understand that you can have your highs and lows during this because we're all experiencing just an array of feelings.
Absolutely. I'm not going to lie. I'm going to tell you the first week and a half of this, I was a complete disaster. I was overwhelmed entirely. There were things I thought I was going to do to help. And I called a couple of my, clients and said, hey, I thought I was going to be able to do this, but I can't. I need to step back for a couple of days.
Right.
I was fortunate that I recognize in myself when I'm reaching a point where I'm not effective and can step back from it. Mm-hmm. And I did step back and I was honest and open with my clients about what I needed in order to get back on my feet so that I could be productive for them. And then when I had my plan in place, I reached out to my clients and said, here are the changes I need to make to stay in business. And here are the changes I need to make to protect myself physically, mentally, and emotionally right now. Mm. And the clients that are with me today are all great clients, and they were all very supportive of that. And that was, if I had not had those clients, I'd be in a different place right now.
I think that I've been also very lucky to have clients and members who understand that we all needed to, expectations have changed. Mm-hmm. And it's okay to ask for a little bit of time. Deadlines have changed or you need time to reflect. We have a couple of questions, so I want to make sure we're addressing some of those. So Pete says, as a work from home or out of the candy factory salesperson, it's just him, that I'm in and out of businesses with prospects or serving existing clients. What actions could I easily miss as I'm in and out of places so much? I wear a mask and practice social distancing, but want to be respectful and compliant.
So the first thing is absolutely wearing a mask. If you're going to be touching a lot of surfaces, having disposable nitrile gloves or latex gloves can be helpful. Even those really thin plastic food service gloves could be something that you can use to kind of reduce what you're touching. I don't know exactly what you're going to be doing, but if you have existing clients and you need to be at their place of business, send them an email and say, hey, I need to be at your location at this time. Are there any procedures I need to be aware of? What can I do to make sure that I'm in compliance with all of your policies and procedures to communicable disease mitigation?
That's a really good point, right? So if you so Pete he does credit card processing. He sets up terminals for restaurants and retail and things like that. So if they're having an issue with their system and he's going in and he's helping, it is really good to know what each individual business's protocols are because they are unique. So asking for that information is very helpful.
And from the business side, if you're the business, having that policy written down, this is where it comes in handy because you can share it very quickly with your vendors and your clients.
Yes, yes, very much so. Very much so. It's very smart. Some other comments and questions. So I was ready to hire someone before this pandemic hit, and now I'm glad I held off on one hand, but I'm faltering trying to do everything. Yeah, so I actually, Krisha, shout out to Krisha if she's watching, was in the process of hiring right before everything hit, the beginning of March. I had offered the job to Krisha as a new community facilitator and executive assistant, which I really, really desperately needed. And we decided to go for it anyway, and still, reduced hours, but she has been absolutely amazing. And actually having her come on to help has made this whole process so much easier, knowing that there's someone there to help with research, help with pulling this protocol, which is very overwhelming together, understanding when I run down a rabbit hole because I'm filling out applications for loans or grants or whatever. So it is interesting that sometimes the quick response is, I need to furlough, I need to get rid of everyone, I need to reduce overhead. But yet it's really important to think about those essential team players, those people who actually could maybe help you navigate this
Right.
together. And that's an important piece. So the team, Austin, Krisha, and Ariana have all been pretty fabulous. So I do thank them for their support.
Well, when it comes to hiring, so you're getting ready to hire someone right before this happens. Was this an expansion hire? Or was this, I'm an overwhelmed hire and I need this person? Has your business shifted now to the point where if it's an overwhelmed hire that you no longer need that help, but might need it later in the future? Or is this something where you might need this person to come on board, but maybe in a slightly different capacity or at slightly reduced hours? And again, knowing where you're at is as important to making that decision as anything else. So hiring right now is kind of an interesting thing. How do you hire during a pandemic when you can't go in? So you have to be really good. You have to be getting resumes from potential new hires. You need to review them. You need to have phone conversations, video conference calls, more than one conversation if you're not doing it in person is my recommendation. In person, you're going to have a slightly different interaction, and you'll have a little bit different way of feeling whether or not this person is going to really be a fit for you. If you're doing it over the phone or you're doing it by video, it does change that dynamic, and it might take more than one conversation to reach that point of knowing. Likewise, don't be surprised if you start having potential new hires asking you questions like, what did you do for COVID-19 to protect your employees? How quickly did you lay people off and bring them back on? These are questions that we're going to start hearing in HR during the hiring process, because how we handle this is going to indicate to them how we handle this in the future. And they're going to need some sort of assurance that they can trust the business that they're coming onto to take care of them and be effective and be mindful of everybody's time and value.
It's so true, right? How you respond and treat people during time of crisis speaks volumes. And it's not just a matter of, I have a job, you should be lucky that I might hire you. It's good that employees or potential employees ask those questions of businesses and potential employers. So if someone was actually out looking for a new job after all of this or during this, that's really good advice for them to start thinking about taking a look at those businesses and how they treat their employees during this time.
Absolutely.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. Heike has a question, and my dog is going to bark. So sorry, our new normal. Heike, my work is often done in public places because of the images my clients need. I'm trying to figure out if I need to educate clients that certain places may be off limits for a while. On the other hand, I photograph at my clients' businesses. So are they responsible for taking precautions, or am I in that situation? That's a good question.
So again, let me reiterate, I'm not a lawyer. I cannot give legal advice. But in this situation, I would be asking your clients what their procedures are, what they're doing to take precautions in this case. And if you feel uncomfortable with their practices, to ask if you can do certain practices that make you feel more comfortable working in that space yourself. When you say certain places might be off limits for a while, I'm not entirely sure what that means, but if there are locations you would normally shoot at for certain types of things that you don't have access to right now, yes, I would be upfront about limited options of availability for shooting locations.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, so those industries, like salons and massage therapy, we have members who do all of those things, makeup artists, those kind of things, who are, physically touching people as well. And I know that most of them don't open or can't open till green phase. I mean, obviously their procedures and protocols are going to even be stricter. What are you hearing on that front? And I've been hearing a lot of anxiety and concern because their reopening is going to take a lot longer than the average business.
Yeah, it's going to take longer than the average business, and it's
just an unfortunate.
It's again, you have to take the time that you need to take in order to do things safely and appropriately. And I get that some of us are in a position in a business where that time is looking like it might be longer than we can afford. And yet, can we afford not to take that time? They're impossible decisions sometimes to make. Do I push forward quickly, or do I take my time where, I don't have all the answers. I don't.
Right. And so what I've been saying is that if you're in those industries who are even greater impacted because your timeline is going to be longer, to really rally within your industries, right? So that peer-to-peer kind of mentoring aspect. But then we as a community should be really rallying around them and offering support to those higher risk businesses that are going to have to stay closed longer. So I just throw it out to anybody in those industries specifically too, like reach out to us. We're here to connect you guys. We're here to support you as best we can, because I think the community can rally around and say, we appreciate you being safe. We appreciate you staying closed because of the nature of your business. So, but we're going to provide support for you, because that's what the biggest concern is. I think a lot of businesses are worried about prolonged closure and their likelihood of being able to reopen. And that's a totally valid concern. But that's where we as a community can really look to support these businesses so they can do the right thing.
Right. I know of at least one small holistic place that they made the decision early on that they were going to close and, close their location permanently in hopes that eventually they'll be able to go back. But they knew they couldn't support the cost of maintaining that space for an extended period of time, and they didn't have confidence that they'd be able to reopen soon enough to continue that investment.
Well, those are really hard questions that I know everyone is asking themselves. I mean, I ran a cafe for a while, and it was this little tiny small to-go cafe. It ran on a very slim margin, and I had to close due to a ton of different reasons. But if that had been open during this time, I have no doubt that I would have had to have closed it permanently. There's just absolutely no way I think I could have made it work. And so I know people are making hard decisions all the time, and my heart goes out to everyone, because I feel the pain. I'm experiencing it with you all, as Jessi, you are too. I mean, we're all just, it's been very trying and challenging. And as it continues to become even, like, building this process it's actually made me think of my facility in a whole new light. So there's good and bad to that, right? And And I'm hoping that the positives from this is that we create an even better experience, a safer place for our people. So looking at the bright side of some of this, what's the silver lining, is that we maybe as employers and business owners are taking a harder look at our businesses and hopefully improving them for the better, for the long haul, for everyone who's touched by them.
Right. Like I said, I'm looking to pivot my business, and I guess in the back of my mind, I always knew I needed to do more virtual things, but at the same time, really, I like in person. I like doing in-person work, and so now I'm really looking at how do I make this work. And I have other clients that are looking to do the exact same thing, and we're now sharing resources. Oh, I was looking at this platform to do this thing. Maybe you should check it out. And they're like, oh, well, we just found this one. Maybe this will help you with what you're looking for. And
yeah, it's so true. And sharing that information is so valuable. And one thing about the co-working movement, and this year, 2010, or 2020 was our 10-year anniversary. We opened in 2010, and like, this was a big deal. We were like slated to have this great year. And so the one thing that I have fallen back on is the fact that the co-working community has a really great global network, and everyone is sharing their procedures, their manuals, and because some spaces in Europe might be opening up before us, we're getting data from them. We're being surveyed, and we're like, the industry itself is such a great example of what collaboration amongst peers in industry could be. And I'm very thankful for that community, global community, that has offered that advice. So that reaching out to those networks and building those networks are really important. I know we have a couple questions, and I want to get to them before we go. Tracy was asking, our procedures for employees will change for each job description due to COVID. If employee refuses to adjust and sign off to new procedures, is that considered resignation or termination?
Interesting question. I would have to say that is something I would actually have to do a little bit of research on to make sure that I was giving sound advice.
Yeah, that's a tough one.
Once the new policy is in place, employees can be discharged for not following, company policy. But when we change policies like this in a required signature, I'd want to make sure that I'm actually giving sound advice on that. I would have to go to my network and do a little bit of research.
Sure. No, we'll get back to you on that one, Tracy. And Anna is just looking for guidelines, which have not been, I guess, put out for cosmetology yet, so they can start planning. So that's something too, is, some industries are still waiting for some of those guidelines based on their industry.
Right. Absolutely. If there is any kind of licensing or certification process that your business goes through, the organizations that administer those might actually have some of those guidelines in place or ready to go. If there's another state that's opened back up, you might find guidelines through that state that can at least get you on the right path until guidelines for our state come out. And that's one of those things. Earlier today, I had someone from Massachusetts go, hey, I have no idea what I'm doing. And I'm like, here's what Pennsylvania's saying.
Got it. Yeah.
Here's the, other industry that's similar to your own that you could look at for advice on what to do.
Makes sense.
And so we all have to do research. Find those businesses that are similar to yours. Find out what their guidelines are. Go to states that have opened back up, that might have those kinds of things, and start planning based on that available advice at this time. And then just know that as things progress, you're going to have to update as more current information comes out, more local information comes out.
And yes, and we know that things are changing all the time, so it's staying up to date with all of those new requirements. So Tracy has 20 years of HR experience, so that's very helpful. Running a company is to have that experience. And So Jessi, before we go, I just thank you for your time this evening and your knowledge and sharing of that knowledge. And as one business owner to another, I really appreciate you taking the time, because I know everyone's a little overwhelmed at this phase. But question: if someone is looking to build their policy and they need some HR advice, is that something that you're offering? Is that people can bounce ideas off of you?
Yes, I'm absolutely still helping businesses and small business owners work on policy development. If you need to brainstorm with me, that's also an option. I will do what I can at the lowest cost possible. My average hourly rate, I'm just going to go ahead and put this out there for now, $35 an hour. I'm not terribly expensive, and that is by design. We are all small business owners. We all have very tight budgets, and we all cannot afford the $150 consultancy fees that many of my peers charge for larger businesses. My goal is to help the small business. And when I say small, I mean, if you're 50 people and under, yes, you're small. If you're 10 people and under, you're exactly my target audience.
Okay, perfect. And it's such a needed service. It's just like thinking of legal and your accountant and bookkeeper, that kind of thing. HR is so essential. So where can we find more information about your services?
So if you want to send me an email, Jessica James Purdy at FICHRpartners.com. I also have a website. It's a Wix site, so it's a little bit of a longer, micro business, exactly.
Excellent, micro business.
So if you do a Google search for FIC Human Resource Partners, Lancaster, Pennsylvania, it'll take you to my website. I'm also on Facebook with the business page. I'm in the Candy Factory directory.
Yes, and we will make sure to share your information as well in the thread.
And log in a little bit later in the Facebook group where this is, and I will put my contact information in there in writing so that you all have it.
Excellent, excellent.
But that'll have to take a minute because I do have a 7:15 meeting.
Yes, so we understand, and your time is valuable, so we don't want to drag you on past 7 o'clock. I know it's a hard stop. So just want to shout out to Dave. Thank you for the comment and for sticking with the Candy Factory for the last 10 years. And thank you everyone who watched and participated in such wonderful questions. We really appreciate that. We're going to be doing a weekly live at the Candy Factory show, bringing you resources and experts like Jessi to the table to help us all navigate this crisis and beyond, because we want to be thinking about the future as well. So Jessi, thank you so much for your time this evening.
And thank you for having me.
Yes, and have a wonderful evening and a wonderful meeting. The day is not done, right? It's just the life of a small business owner. Never done. Never done. Thank you all for joining us.
Yeah, I hope everybody got something out of this. I hope I was at least somewhat helpful to some of you. So thank you all very much for having me on.
Very much so. Have a good night, everyone. Thanks, Jessi.
Night.